From filmmaker and original Chainsaw writer Kim Henkel comes the fourth entry in the Chainsaw franchise. Arguably the weirdest and most abstract movie in the series, featuring the likes of pre-fame Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, in a story that tries to be both a sequel and a reboot of the overall original story, yet injecting the narrative with some of the zaniest characters and most acid-trip narrative choices seen in any Chainsaw movie ever. Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. In what started out as a project called The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a weird title when you think about it, Kim Henkel, one of two writers from the original film, the other being Tobe Hooper of course, sought to make a chainsaw film that really brought the series back to the tone and vibe of the 1974 original, which for most people meant a film that was gritty and real, visceral and unforgiving in tone, shot in documentary-style methods, and very small in scale, especially in comparison to the second and third films. Whether we really got those things in the final version of this movie is debatable, but there's no denying that Henkel did give us the weirdest chainsaw film ever made. To this day, even with all the requels and prequels and what have you, nothing has ever come close to Next Generation's level of wackiness and avant-garde way of storytelling. There's a fantastic making-of documentary about this film, and I highly suggest you watch it, because it really is a great look into the madness behind this movie. I would like to point out that, unlike Chainsaw 3, Next Generation was actually shot in Texas, so big props to Kim Henkel for that. Not California, not Louisiana, not Bulgaria, but Texas, where a Leatherface movie should be shot. The movie also does stand out as the one chainsaw film in the series that just feels totally different than any other, not just because of the aforementioned weirdness, but because it just seems to have a different attitude about it. When you throw in those aspects, as well as Leatherface's overt cross-dressing, the parody and self-referencing, and the secret society subplot, yes, you heard that correctly, you have yourself a movie that is bold and unapologetic in its effort to be its own thing, regardless of what the fans ended up thinking about it. On May 22, 1994, four teenagers, Barry, Heather, Jenny, and Sean, played by Tyler Cohn, Lisa Marie Newmeyer, Renee Zellweger, and John Harrison respectively, attend their school's prom. When Heather discovers Barry cheating on her with another girl, she storms out of the dance, followed closely by Barry, who tries to explain himself as they drive away in his car. Their argument is interrupted by Jenny and Sean, who are hiding in the back seat, smoking marijuana. Heather takes a detour off the freeway, and while distracted, collides with another motorist, played by Vince Brock, who passes out in the ensuing confusion. Jenny, Heather, and Barry leave Sean to look after the unconscious motorist, while they search for help. They stop at an office trailer, where they meet Darla, an insurance agent, played by Tony Perinsky, who promises to call her boyfriend, a tow truck driver named Vilmer. They leave the office and begin heading back towards the wreck. Vilmer soon shows up at the scene of the wreck, played by Matthew McConaughey, killing the motorist before chasing Sean in his truck and backing over him repeatedly. Meanwhile, Heather and Barry become separated from Jenny and discover an old farmhouse in the woods. As Barry looks around, Heather is attacked by Leatherface, played by Robert Jacks, and is subsequently forced into a meat locker. One of Vilmer and Leatherface's family members, W.E. Slaughter, played by Joe Stevens, finds Barry and holds him at gunpoint before forcing him inside. Also, W.E. Slaughter sounds very similar to W.E. Sawyer, heard in the opening crawl of Texas Chainsaw 3. Barry tricks W.E. and locks him out, but while using the bathroom, Barry discovers a corpse in the bathtub. He is then killed by Leatherface with a sledgehammer. After killing Barry, Leatherface impales Heather on a meat hook. Jenny returns to the scene of the wreck, where she is met by Vilmer, who offers her a ride. She accepts, only for Vilmer to threaten her life, before showing her the bodies of Sean and the motorist. Jenny jumps out of the truck, and runs into the woods. She is soon attacked by Leatherface, resulting in a lengthy chase through the farmhouse, where she finds several preserved corpses in an upstairs bedroom. After leaping through an upstairs window, Jenny manages to flee the property. She seeks refuge from Darla, who reveals herself to be in league with the killers. When W.E. shows up and beats her with a cattle prod, the two put her in Darla's trunk, and she leaves to pick up some pizzas for dinner. After being tormented by Vilmer, Jenny momentarily escapes, attempting to drive off in Darla's car. She is stopped by Vilmer, who knocks her unconscious. She soon awakens at a dinner table, surrounded by the family, who reveal they are employed by a secret society to terrorize people that may cross their path. A man named Rothman, played by James Gale, shows up, reprimanding Vilmer for his methods, before revealing an array of scars and piercings on his torso and licking Jenny's face. Rothman leaves and Vilmer terrorizes his family and Jenny, killing Heather by crushing her skull under his cybernetic leg and knocking W.E. unconscious with a hammer. Vilmer and Leatherface prepare to kill Jenny, who breaks free and, using the controller to control Vilmer's leg, escapes. Jenny reaches a dirt road where she is rescued by an elderly couple in an RV, played by Gira Wilcott and Axel Schiller, respectively. However, Leatherface and Vilmer run them off the road, resulting in the RV falling on its side. Jenny emerges from the vehicle unscathed and continues running, with Leatherface and Vilmer in hot pursuit. A plane swoops down on Vilmer, killing him when one of the wheels grazes his skull. Leatherface screams in anguish while Jenny looks on. Suddenly, a limousine pulls up and Jenny jumps into the back seat, where she is again met by Rothman, who apologizes to her, explaining her experience was supposed to be spiritual and that Vilmer had to be stopped. He offers to take her to a police station or a hospital, and she ends up getting dropped off at a hospital, where she speaks to an officer. Sally Hardesty, being pushed by on a gurney and played once again by Marilyn Burns in a tiny cameo role, meets Jenny's gaze. Blink and you might miss it, but if you look closely, two other Chainsaw alumni make cameo appearances in the scene as well, the first being John Dugan, who played Grandpa in the first film as a police officer, and the other being Paul A. Partain, who played Franklin in the '74 film, now playing an orderly. Back on the dirt road, as the sun sets, Leatherface continues to flail his chainsaw in despair. Well, that's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Kim Henkel definitely brought a binder full of acid to set every day. Come on, y'all, let's make a movie. And then this movie was the result of that. Strange, weird, completely insane, completely on another level. I'm not sure what level that would even be, but another level nonetheless. I remember hearing about this movie a while before I finally came across it in the video store. I was 11 when the movie finally hit shelves, so not only do I remember reading about it in Fangoria, or at least that's where I assume I read about it since that was the only horror magazine I was reading at the time, but I remember the guys in the video store telling me about it as well, knowing how much I loved the other movies. I even got a full-sized poster of the movie, gifted to me by the video store. Yes, video stores were on another level back then, especially the mom and pop ones, where you legitimately knew and talked with the video store clerks back in the day. And I swear the poster was reversible, just like the VHS of the movie itself, but that may be a false memory I'm confusing with said VHS tape itself. Regardless, I had the poster, knew about the movie, and when it finally came out, I of course rented it. I vividly remember hating the way the opening prologue sounded. I just thought the voice sounded hokey and wooden, and I remember being almost numb to the entire movie at the time. It was just too damn noisy and didn't make sense, and had no ties to the other movies in any way that I could see. I didn't like the acting, I didn't like the look, I didn't like the setting of the main house. The score was pretty creepy sounding, but other than that, I was just not a fan of this movie at all. At least at that time. Oh, and I absolutely hated the portrayal of Leatherface in this movie. The look too, I thought it was horrible. The camo jacket, the oversized gloves, the brown pancake of his skin mask. I couldn't stand it. I remember renting it once, maybe twice more, between '98 and the early 2000s, but the film never really grew on me. Until recently, that is, but just barely. After a couple decades to step back, the film's faults have softened in my mind a bit, and I can sort of appreciate what the film is versus what it should have been a little better than I could before. Robert Jacks seemed like a really cool guy in real life, but I just hated this movie's Leatherface, and still do if we're being honest. Well, maybe hate's a strong word, but strongly dislike, let's just say that. The overt cross-dressing of Leatherface seems like an extreme response to his female masks and/or costumes of the first film, such as the granny or the pretty lady, but it fits the vibe of this film and doesn't feel tacked in there for the sake of being there. Although I dislike the idea of the family being a weapon of horror controlled by the Illuminati, it was at least a bold choice, and I can respect that. I never want to see that concept again in the Chainsaw film, but I can respect it. Zellweger is good in her role, and McConaughey, as crazy and memorable and extreme as he is, really annoys the hell out of me in this movie. Just too much yelling and screaming. I think my dislike for this movie derives greatly from how damn repetitively noisy it is. And this is coming from a guy who loves a franchise of films where chainsaws are the predominant sound effect, and the chainsaw wasn't even the loudest or most annoying part of this movie. Look, I realize a ton of people love McConaughey in this movie, but it's just not for me. Props to the cast and crew for making something different though, and for trudging through the circus that was the making of this movie. Kim Henkel definitely worked his ass off to make this movie, and although I'm not the biggest fan, I can respect the fact that he got it done and championed it from start to finish. And again, definitely not an unwatchable film, not in the slightest. Just not my cup of tea, but undeniably unique. The cameos by some of the original cast at the end was cool though. Also, I believe the murderous family on display within this film are actually the Slaughters and not the Sawyers, but I'm not sure if that's explicitly exclusive or if they're just another faction of the actual Sawyer clan. Again, big props to Kim Henkel, and rest in peace to Robert Jacks, who passed away in 2001. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, is passably average.